The obsidian halls of the Imperial Signal Chamber stretched into darkness. Thousands of screens covered the walls, each one showing data from distant stars. In this room, the Velinor Dominion listened to the entire galaxy. High Arbiter Kethval stood at the center of it all. He was tall, even by Dominion standards, his gray skin pulled tight over sharp bones. His eyes, black as the void between stars, watched as his analysts worked. For 6,000 years, his ancestors had ruled from this very chamber. They had conquered 12,000 worlds. They had crushed 400 billion souls under their rule. Nothing in the galaxy surprised the Dominion anymore. "High Arbiter," said a young analyst, his voice shaking slightly. "We have decoded the transmission." Kethval turned slowly. A transmission from the uncharted spiral arm had arrived 3 days ago. His ships had been moving toward that region for decades, following the radio signals of a primitive species. Now, finally, that species had noticed them. "Display it," Kethval commanded. The main screen flickered. Mathematical symbols appeared first, the universal language that all intelligent species eventually discovered. Then the symbols translated into words. 12 words. Just 12 simple words. "We know you're coming. Turn back now. There will be no second warning." Silence filled the chamber. The analysts looked at each other. Then, slowly, one of them laughed. Another joined him. Soon the whole room was laughing. Kethval did not laugh. He stared at the message with his ancient eyes. Something about it bothered him, though he could not say what. "High Arbiter?" asked his senior analyst, wiping tears of amusement from his face. "Shall I archive this with the other surrender attempts?" "It is not a surrender attempt," Kethval said quietly. "No, High Arbiter. It appears to be a threat." The analyst laughed again. "A threat from a species that still uses chemical rockets." Kethval nodded slowly. "Summon the War Council. I want full intelligence on this species within 1 cycle." The War Council chamber was built from the bones of conquered worlds. Each pillar contained the remains of a defeated emperor or president or king. It was a reminder of what happened to those who stood against the Dominion. 7 figures sat around the ancient table. Each one commanded enough firepower to burn a planet to glass. Together, they had never known defeat. Intelligence Minister Yara VIII stood before them. She was old. Her scales faded to a dull brown, but her mind remained sharp. "The species calls themselves humans," she began. "They exist on the 3rd planet of a yellow star in the outer spiral arm. Population, approximately 11 billion. They have achieved basic space travel but have not left their star system. No faster than light capability. No energy shields. No plasma weapons." War Master Gorvan laughed. He was a massive creature, scarred from 100 battles. "This is what sent us a threat. This is what told the Dominion to turn back. They detected our 9th conquest fleet, approximately 4 of their years ago," Yara VIII continued. "Their detection technology is surprisingly sophisticated. Long-range sensors. Mathematical analysis of our engine signatures. They knew we were coming before we knew they existed." "Impressive for primitives," said Admiral Thesk, the youngest member of the Council. "But detection is not defense. What can they actually do to stop us?" Yara VIII pulled up images of Earth, blue oceans, green land, white clouds. It looked fragile, beautiful, doomed. "Their weapons are nuclear," she said. "Powerful by primitive standards but useless against our shields. Their fastest ships would take years to reach our fleet. Their strongest metals would crack under our plasma fire." She paused. "They have no chance of survival." High Arbiter Kethval leaned forward. "Then why did they send this message? Why not beg for mercy? Why not offer surrender?" The council members looked at each other. It was a good question. Every species the Dominion had encountered eventually understood their position. The smart ones surrendered. The stupid ones fought and died. But none of them had ever sent a message like this. "Perhaps they are simply foolish," suggested Gorvun. "Perhaps they do not understand what they face. Or perhaps," said Yara VIII slowly, "they understand exactly what they face, and they have decided to die on their feet rather than live on their knees." "Poetic," said Thesk with a cruel smile. "But poetry does not stop plasma." Kethval raised his hand. The room fell silent. "Continue the approach," he commanded. "The 9th Fleet will arrive in 4.7 standard cycles. At that time, we will offer them the standard choice: surrender and serve, or resist and die. He stood, his robes flowing around him like shadows. Archive the message. It changes nothing. The council bowed their heads. The matter was settled. But deep in the Imperial archives, far from the halls of power, someone was not satisfied. Scholar Orveth had served the Dominion for 200 years. His job was simple. He studied conquered species. He learned their languages, their cultures, their histories. Most of what he learned was useless, dead civilizations telling dead stories. But sometimes, rarely, he found something interesting. Tonight, he had found something terrifying. The humans had sent a message before. Decades ago, before the Dominion even knew they existed, a small probe had drifted into Dominion space. It was primitive metal and circuits, powered by a radioactive battery. The Dominion had captured it, studied it briefly, and forgotten about it. Orveth had not forgotten. He pulled up the probe's records now. It had carried a golden disc, covered in strange symbols. The analysts at the time had dismissed it as primitive art, religious nonsense. They had not bothered to fully decode it. Orveth had. The disc was a message, a greeting to whoever found it. It contained sounds of their planet, wind and water and animal calls. It contained music. It contained greetings in dozens of their languages. And it contained images. Orveth stared at those images now. Humans. Small creatures, soft and fragile, with strange, flat faces and tiny eyes. They should have looked weak. They should have looked afraid, but they were smiling. In every image, no matter what they were doing, the humans were smiling. They smiled while they worked. They smiled while they played. They smiled while they held their children. They had sent this probe into the unknown darkness of space, knowing that whoever found it might be a predator. They had included their location. They had included images of themselves. And they had smiled. What kind of species did that? Orveth dug deeper. The Dominion's long-range sensors had been watching Earth for decades. He accessed the recordings, the intercepted transmissions, the analyzed data. What he found made his blood run cold. The humans had been at war, not with some external enemy, with each other, constantly, endlessly. Their history was written in blood. They had invented weapons that could crack their own planet. They had used them on each other. They had come close to destroying themselves, not once, not twice, but dozens of times, and yet they were still here. Orveth found records of their wars, millions dead in single conflicts, cities burned, populations displaced, and after each war, the humans did something impossible. They rebuilt, they recovered, they grew stronger. He found records of their disasters, plagues that killed millions, natural catastrophes that leveled cities, and each time, the humans came back. They adapted, they survived. He found records of their cruelty. Humans had done terrible things to each other, things that made even Dominion conquest look gentle. They had enslaved their own kind. They had committed genocide. They had invented suffering in ways that Orveth could barely comprehend. But he also found something else. He found records of their kindness. Humans who ran into burning buildings to save strangers. Humans who gave their lives for others. Humans who shared their food during famines, their shelter during storms, their hope during darkest nights. This species was a contradiction. They were capable of both the greatest cruelty and the greatest compassion. They destroyed and they created. They hated and they loved. And now, for the first time in their history, they had a common enemy. Orveth's hands trembled as he drafted his report. He sent it to Intelligence Minister Yara Eth's office with an urgent marker. He begged for an audience. He needed them to understand what they were facing. The humans had sent a single message: turn back, or else. They had not begged. They had not pleaded. They had not tried to negotiate. They had warned. And in all his 200 years of studying conquered species, Orveth had never seen anything like it. The days passed. Orveth heard nothing. His report sat unread in some bureaucrat's inbox. The 9th Conquest Fleet continued its approach. The war drums of the Dominion beat on. In the obsidian halls of power, no one spoke of the humans anymore. They were just another primitive species, just another world to be conquered, just another notch in the Dominion's belt. But on Earth, something was happening. When the humans had first detected the approaching fleet 4 years ago, there had been panic. Governments had collapsed, religions had fractured. For 6 terrible hours, humanity had stared into the abyss, And then something changed. No one knew who made the first call. Some said it was the American president. Others said it was the Chinese premier. Some claimed it was a secretary at the United Nations who simply started dialing numbers and refused to stop. Whatever the truth, by the end of that day, every leader on Earth was talking. By the end of that week, they had reached an agreement. By the end of that month, they had signed a treaty that made all previous alliances look like children's games. The United Earth Defense Council was born. Every factory on the planet shifted to war production. Every scientist, every engineer, every brilliant mind was drafted into a single purpose. Every resource, every dollar, every ounce of human potential was focused on one goal: survival. The humans did not know if they could win. They did not know if they could even fight. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would not go quietly. They sent their message 12 words that contained all of humanity's defiance, all of humanity's pride, all of humanity's desperate hope, and then they got to work. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo stood in the newly built command center beneath the Swiss Alps. Screens surrounded her, showing progress reports from every continent. Factories running day and night, scientists working until they collapsed, soldiers training with weapons that had not existed a year ago. Her aide approached with a tablet. "The latest projections, ma'am." Okonkwo took the tablet. The numbers were not good. Even with humanity's greatest effort, even with their unprecedented unity, the projections showed defeat. The Dominion fleet was simply too powerful. Their technology was too advanced. Their numbers were too great. She handed the tablet back. "Update the projections when we break the physics barrier," she said calmly. Her aide blinked. "Ma'am, Dr. Chen's team is close. They'll crack faster than light travel within the month." She allowed herself a small smile. "The projections assume we can't do the impossible. They should know by now that's what we do best." The aide nodded and hurried away. Okonkwo turned back to the screens. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between stars, a fleet of 2,000 warships was coming to destroy her species. They had conquered 12,000 worlds. They had crushed 400 billion souls. They had never met humans. "They should have listened," she said quietly. They really should have listened. Back in the Imperial archives, Orveth made one final attempt. He gathered his research, every scrap of data, every image, every recording, and he went to the Intelligence Ministry in person. The guards stopped him at the door. "I need to see Minister Yara Eth," he said desperately. "It's about the humans. There's something she needs to understand." The guard looked at him with bored eyes. "The human matter is closed. The Ninth Fleet will handle it. You don't understand. These creatures, they're not like the others. They've been fighting their entire existence. They've nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times, and every time, they came back stronger. If we give them time, if we give them a reason to unite, -7. Scholar Orveth." The guard's voice was cold. "The Dominion has conquered species that burned stars. We have defeated empires that spanned galaxies. What could a primitive world of soft creatures possibly do to threaten us?" Orveth opened his mouth to answer, but he could see it in the guard's eyes, the same arrogance he saw everywhere in the Dominion. The absolute certainty that they were the greatest power in the universe. "Nothing," Orveth said quietly. "Of course, nothing at all." He turned and walked away. His research would be forgotten. His warnings would be ignored. The Dominion would continue on its path, blind to the danger ahead. And somewhere across the galaxy, 11 billion humans were working, building, preparing. They had received their death sentence. They had been given 4 years to accept their fate. Instead, they had chosen to fight. The last image from the golden disk floated through Orveth's mind. A human woman, holding a child, looking up at the stars. She was smiling. What kind of species looked at the infinite darkness of the universe and smiled? Orveth was beginning to understand, and it terrified him. 4 years was not a long time. In the life of the Dominion, it was less than a heartbeat. Civilizations rose and fell while the Empire barely noticed. 4 years was nothing. But for humans, 4 years was everything. In 4 years, a human child could learn to walk, talk, and dream. In 4 years, a human scientist could revolutionize an entire field. In 4 years, human soldiers could train, fight, and die. In 4 years, humanity could change everything. The Ninth Conquest Fleet moved through the darkness, steady and confident. 2,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a world. They carried enough firepower to burn Earth 100 times over. Commander Torvax stood on his bridge and watched the stars slide past. He had conquered 43 worlds in his career. He had never failed. He did not expect to fail now. The message from Earth sat in his records, archived and forgotten. 12 words from a doomed species. We know you're coming. Turn back now. There will be no second warning. Torvax had laughed when he first read it. He did not think about it anymore. He should have, because across the void, humanity was waiting. They had built ships in secret. They had developed weapons in hidden laboratories. They had trained soldiers in underground facilities. They had done the impossible. Again and again. Because that was what humans did. The Ninth Fleet would arrive expecting a terrified, primitive species. They would find something very different. They would find humanity. And by then, it would be far too late to turn back. The blue planet hung in the void like a jewel. White clouds swirled across its surface. Green and brown continents stretched beneath them. It looked peaceful. It looked beautiful. Commander Torvax watched it from his command bridge and felt nothing but contempt. Begin standard conquest protocol, he ordered. Broadcast the surrender demand in all detected languages. The communications officer nodded and activated the transmission. The message went out across all frequencies, a simple choice that the Dominion had offered to countless worlds before. Surrender now, and some of you will live. Resist, and all of you will die. The Ninth Conquest Fleet had emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. 2,000 warships spread across the darkness like a cloud of metal and fire. Each ship was a masterpiece of destruction, carrying weapons that could crack continents and shields that could withstand the heat of a star. Against this, the humans had what? Chemical rockets, nuclear bombs, primitive satellites. Torvax allowed himself a thin smile. This would be easy, Commander. The communications officer's voice was strange. We have a response. Already? Torvax frowned. Usually primitive species took hours to respond, their governments arguing and panicking before finally accepting the inevitable. Display it. The screen flickered. A human face appeared. It was a female, Torvax noted. Dark skin, gray hair, calm eyes. She wore some kind of formal uniform, blue and white, with symbols he did not recognize. Behind her, Torvax could see a room filled with screens and equipment. This is Secretary General Amara Okonkwo of the United Earth Defense Council, the human said. Her voice was steady. I am addressing the commander of the approaching fleet. Torvax leaned forward slightly. The creature's composure was surprising. Most species were screaming by now. You received our message 4 years ago. Okonkwo continued. We asked you to turn back. We warned you that there would be no second warning. You came anyway. She paused. And then she did something that made Torvax's scales prickle with an unfamiliar sensation. She smiled. We want you to know, she said. We prepared. The transmission ended. Torvax stared at the blank screen. Around him, his officers shifted uncomfortably. Something about the human's smile had unsettled them all. Analysis, Torvax snapped. What does our sensors show? What forces do they have? The science officer bent over his console. His frown deepened. Commander, I'm detecting anomalies. There are structures in orbit that were not present in our last survey. Large structures, and there's some kind of energy signature coming from the planet's atmosphere. What kind of energy signature? Unknown. It doesn't match anything in our database. Torvax felt the first whisper of uncertainty, but he pushed it aside. The Dominion had faced surprises before. They had never mattered. Proceed with the demonstration, he ordered. Target the large coastal city on the eastern continent. One plasma burst. Show them what they face. The weapons officer nodded. The fleet's plasma cannons began to charge. Hundreds of ships oriented themselves toward Earth, each one preparing to add its fire to the bombardment. Firing, the weapons officer announced. Light erupted from the fleet. Hundreds of plasma bolts, each one burning hotter than a star's core, streaked toward the planet. They would hit the target in seconds. The city would cease to exist. Millions would die. The plasma fire reached Earth's atmosphere and stopped. Torvax surged to his feet. What? On the main screen, he could see it. The plasma bolts had hit something, a shimmer in the upper atmosphere, a barely visible barrier that stretched across the sky. The bolts splashed against it like water against stone. Energy rippled outward. Light flashed, but the city remained untouched. They have a planetary shield, the science officer whispered. Commander, they have a planetary shield. That's impossible. 4 years ago, they didn't even have fusion power. The communications console crackled. Secretary General Okonkwo's face appeared again. Commander, she said, still calm, still smiling. I believe I mentioned that we prepared. Torvax's hands clenched into fists. What is this? What have you done? You gave us 4 years' warning, Okonkwo replied. 4 years to prepare for your arrival. Do you have any idea what humans can do in 4 years when we're scared? She leaned forward slightly. We put aside our differences. We united our nations. We combined our knowledge, and we worked. Day and night. Without rest. Without pause. We built things that our own scientists said were impossible. You cannot have developed this technology in 4 years, Torvax snarled. It takes centuries. For your species, perhaps. Okonkwo's eyes were hard. But we are not your species. We have been solving impossible problems since we first climbed down from the trees. When our world tried to kill us, we survived. When diseases swept through our populations, we cured them. When we ran out of resources, we found new ones. She paused. You threatened our existence, and you gave us time to respond. The screen flickered. New data appeared, sensor readings from around the planet. We would have preferred peace, Okonkwo said. We sent you that message hoping you would listen. You didn't. And now, behind Earth's moon, something moved. Torvax's tactical officer made a strangled sound. Commander, ships, thousands of ships. They came around the moon in waves. Human ships, but not like anything the Dominion had seen. They were sleek and angular, covered in strange alloys that scattered sensor readings. They moved fast, impossibly fast, on engines that burned with unfamiliar energy. That's not possible, Torvax breathed. They didn't have faster-than-light capability. They do now, his science officer replied. And shields. And weapons that I can't identify. The human fleet spread out in formation. Torvax counted the ships. 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. More kept coming. Small fighters poured out of larger carriers. Heavy cruisers took position in battle lines, and leading them all was a massive vessel, bristling with weapons that made even Dominion battleships look small. The UEDS Unity, Okonkwo said, as if reading his thoughts. Our flagship, built in secret over the last 3 years. We named it after what made it possible. She smiled that terrible smile again. Would you like to surrender now, Commander? We accept prisoners. Torvax felt rage building in his chest. How dare this creature mock him? How dare these primitives think they could stand against the Dominion? All ships, he commanded, his voice cold. Attack formation. Destroy them. The Ninth Fleet moved. 2,000 warships shifted into battle positions, their weapons charging, their shields activating. They had conquered 43 worlds. They had never lost. The human fleet moved too. And Torvax saw something that made his scales go pale. The humans were not defensive. They were not trying to protect their planet. They were charging, coming straight at the Dominion fleet with weapons blazing. The first human ship reached the Dominion lines. It was a small fighter, barely larger than a shuttle. It should have been insignificant. It flew directly at Torvax's flagship. The ship's shields flared as plasma fire tried to stop it. The fighter did not slow down. It's going to hit us, someone shouted. The fighter struck the flagship's shields. And then, it detonated. The explosion was nuclear, a raw, primitive atomic blast. But it was focused somehow, channeled by technology that the Dominion did not understand. The shield flickered, for a moment, just a moment. It weakened. Another fighter followed. Then another. Then dozens. Torvax stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human pilots were not ejecting. They were not trying to survive. They were flying their ships directly into Dominion shields and detonating their own reactors. They're killing themselves, his tactical officer whispered. They're using their own ships as weapons. They're insane, Torvax said. No, said a quiet voice from behind him. Torvax turned. It was Scholar Orveth, who had somehow made his way to the command bridge. The old researcher looked at the battle with something like awe. They're not insane, Orveth said. They're human. The battle exploded across the system. Human ships darted between Dominion vessels, faster and more maneuverable than anything the Empire had faced. They used tactics that made no sense, sacrificing ships to breach shields, using their own bodies as weapons, pushing their engines past safety limits until they exploded. And they were winning. Torvax watched as his fleet began to burn. Ships that had conquered worlds were torn apart by human fighters. Vessels that had survived 100 battles were cracked open by nuclear fire. The Dominion's technological superiority meant nothing against enemies who did not care if they lived or died. "Commander," his communications officer called out. "Boarding alert. Human vessels are attaching to our hull." "Repel them," Torvax ordered. "Send the security forces." Minutes later, the reports came in. They made no sense. The humans were smaller than Dominion soldiers, weaker. Their armor was primitive. Their weapons were crude. They were winning anyway. One report described a human Marine who took 11 wounds and kept fighting. Another described humans who detonated grenades in their own hands rather than be captured. A third described a human who broke her own arms pushing through a collapsed corridor, then used her teeth to activate her weapon. "What are these creatures?" Torvax's security chief demanded over the comm. "They don't stop. They don't surrender. We kill them, and more keep coming." Orvith stepped forward. "May I, Commander?" Torvax looked at the scholar with hollow eyes. His fleet was dying. His soldiers were losing. Everything he thought he knew about warfare was crumbling. "Speak." "I tried to warn the Council," Orvith said quietly. "These creatures have been at war since they first walked upright. They have fought each other for 10,000 years. They have invented every form of violence imaginable, and they have survived every attempt to destroy them, including their own attempts." On the screen, another Dominion ship exploded. Human fighters swarmed over its burning hull like predators. "They are not brave," Orvith continued. "They are not stupid. They simply understand something that we do not. They have always known they would die. Their lives are short, barely a century. They are born knowing that death waits for them." He paused. "So they decided that their deaths would mean something." A human ship rammed into a Dominion cruiser. Both vessels exploded. The human pilot had not even tried to escape. "We fight to live," Orvith said. "They fight to matter." Torvax slumped in his command chair. Around him, his officers watched in horror as their fleet crumbled. The humans were everywhere now, their ships darting through the wreckage, hunting survivors, pressing the attack. "Commander," his communications officer's voice was barely a whisper. "Secretary General Okonkwo is requesting to speak with you." Torvax laughed. It was a broken sound. "Put her through." Okonkwo's face appeared on the screen. Behind her, Torvax could see human officers celebrating. They were hugging each other. Some were crying. "Commander Torvax," Okonkwo said, "your fleet is destroyed. Your soldiers are defeated. I offer you the same choice you offered us. Surrender or die." Torvax stared at her. This small, fragile creature who had brought the mighty Dominion to its knees. "How?" he asked. "How did you do this in 4 years?" Okonkwo's expression softened slightly. "You want to know our secret? It's simple, Commander. You gave us something we had never had before. You gave us a common enemy." She leaned forward. "Humans have always been at war with each other. Our history is written in blood. But we have also always dreamed of unity, of setting aside our differences and working together. We could never do it. There was always some excuse, some reason to fight." She smiled. "But it was sad now. And then you came. And suddenly, none of those reasons mattered anymore." Torvax looked at the wreckage of his fleet. 1,400 ships destroyed, the rest damaged or captured, millions of his soldiers dead. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "The Dominion has hundreds of fleets. We will return." "I know," Okonkwo replied. "And we will be ready. You cannot defeat the entire empire." "Perhaps not." Okonkwo straightened. "But we can make them bleed. We can make them pay for every world they take. We can show the galaxy that the Dominion can be hurt." Her eyes hardened. "And we can give hope to every species they have conquered." The transmission ended. Torvax sat in silence. Around him, his surviving officers waited for orders. But he had none to give. He thought about the message that had started it all. 12 words that the Dominion had laughed at and ignored. "We know you're coming. Turn back now. There will be no second warning." They should have listened. They really should have listened. Far away, in the obsidian halls of the Imperial Signal Chamber, High Arbiter Kethval received the battle report. He read it 3 times, certain that there must be a mistake. There was no mistake. The 9th Conquest Fleet was gone, destroyed by a species that had been throwing rocks at each other a few thousand years ago. The most humiliating defeat in Dominion history. Kethval felt something stir in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation. It took him a moment to identify it. Fear. He looked at the images from the battle. Human ships swarming like insects. Human soldiers fighting with suicidal fury. Human pilots flying into death with smiles on their faces. What had the Dominion awakened? Kethval summoned his advisors. The council chambers filled with worried faces. For the first time in 6,000 years, the Empire's leaders were uncertain. This changes nothing. War Master Gorvan insisted. We lost one fleet to surprise. We will not be surprised again. The humans have technology that they should not possess. Intelligence Minister Yara Eighth countered. They developed faster than light travel in 4 years. What will they develop in another 4? In 10? In 50? Then we destroy them now, Gorvan snarled. We send everything we have. We burn their world to ash. And if we fail? The question came from Scholar Orveth, who had finally been granted his audience. If we send our full strength and they defeat us, what message does that send to our conquered subjects? Silence filled the chamber. Kethval stared at the old scholar. You knew. You tried to warn us. I tried. Orveth's voice was tired. No one listened. Tell me, Kethval commanded. Tell me what we are facing. Orveth stepped forward. We are facing a species that nearly destroyed itself a dozen times and survived. We are facing creatures who have been at war since birth, who have developed every weapon imaginable, who have suffered every atrocity and endured. We are facing a species that does not know how to surrender. He paused. We are facing humanity, and I do not know if we can win. The council erupted in argument. Some demanded immediate attack. Others counseled caution. A few suggested negotiation, though they were quickly shouted down. But Kethval remained silent. He stared at the images from the battle, at the human ships burning through his fleet, at the faces of human soldiers fighting to the death. He thought about the message again, the warning that he had ignored, and for the first time in his long life, the High Arbiter of the Velinor Dominion wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The war had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The human fighter came out of nowhere. Lieutenant Korvac saw it on his screens for barely a second before it slammed into his cruiser's shields. The explosion lit up the void, and for a moment, he thought they had survived. Then he saw the pilot. The human had ejected at the last second not to escape, but to fire a handheld weapon directly at the weakened shield. The shot punched through. The pilot followed, crashing through the breach before the shields could regenerate. By the time security reached the hull breach, the human was already dead. She had burned up in the entry, but clutched in her charred hands was a nuclear device, its timer counting down. The cruiser Invincible died 3 seconds later. This was the Battle of Sol, and nothing the Dominion had ever faced prepared them for it. Across the system, similar scenes played out. Human pilots pushed their engines past breaking points, accelerating so fast that the G-forces should have killed them. Many did die, their hearts exploding, their brains hemorrhaging, but they did it anyway, because those extra seconds of speed meant reaching their targets before Dominion weapons could track them. Human soldiers fought with injuries that would have incapacitated any other species. They tied off severed limbs and kept firing. They crawled through corridors with broken spines. They triggered grenades in their own hands to take enemies with them. And they never, ever stopped. Commander Torvax watched from his crippled flagship as his fleet was torn apart. He had seen war before. He had witnessed the death of worlds. But he had never seen anything like this. They're not soldiers, his tactical officer whispered. They're weapons, living weapons. Torvax did not reply. There was nothing to say. In the years that followed, historians would study the Battle of Sol. They would analyze the tactics, the technology, the decisions that led to the Dominion's defeat. But they would always struggle to explain what truly happened. How could a species that had achieved faster than light travel only months before defeat a fleet that had conquered thousands of worlds? The answer lay not in technology, but in history, in the long, bloody story of humanity. 4 years earlier, the world had been different. Dr. Elena Chen stood in her laboratory at CERN, staring at numbers that made no sense. She was a theoretical physicist, one of the best in the world, and she was looking at data that violated everything she knew about the universe. The gravity waves are wrong, she muttered to her assistant. They shouldn't be able to curve like this. Her assistant, a young man named James, looked up from his terminal. We've been over the data 100 times, Dr. Chen. The readings are accurate. Then our understanding of physics is incomplete. Elena ran her fingers through her gray hair. Which means someone out there knows something we don't. That was before the signal came. Before the world learned that an alien fleet was approaching. Before everything changed. When the news broke, Elena watched the world fall apart. Governments collapsed, markets crashed, religions shattered. For 6 terrible hours, humanity tore itself to pieces in fear and despair. And then something strange happened. Elena received a call from the President of the United States, then from the Premier of China, then from the Prime Minister of India, then from leaders she had never heard of, from countries she could barely find on a map. They all asked the same question. Can you help us? She told them the truth. She did not know if anyone could help. The aliens had technology that was centuries ahead of humanity. Their ships could cross the stars, while human rockets struggled to reach Mars. But she also told them something else. I've been studying their gravity signatures, she said, and I think they don't understand their own technology. They're using principles that work, but they don't know why they work. They're mechanics, not scientists. What does that mean? The American president asked. Elena smiled for the first time since the crisis began. It means they have a ceiling. They've reached the limit of what they can do with trial and error. But us? She gestured at the equations on her whiteboard. We're just getting started. Within a month, the United Earth Defense Council was formed. Within 6 months, Elena was leading a team of 12,000 scientists from every nation on Earth. Within a year, they had cracked the fundamental principles behind the alien technology, and within 2 years, they had surpassed it. But technology alone would not win the war. For that, humanity needed soldiers. Sergeant Maria Santos had been fighting wars since she was 19 years old. She had served in conflicts across 3 continents, seen friends die in her arms, and collected scars that mapped her body like a road atlas. When the call came for volunteers, she was the first in line. You understand what you're signing up for, the recruiter told her. This isn't going to be like any war you've fought before. Maria looked at him with flat eyes. I've fought in wars where we were outgunned, outmanned, and outmatched. I've fought against enemies who had every advantage, and I'm still here. She leaned forward. So tell me about these aliens, and then tell me how to kill them. The training was brutal. Human bodies were fragile compared to the Dominion soldiers they would face. Human reflexes were slower. Human strength was weaker, so they adapted. Scientists developed drugs that pushed human performance beyond natural limits. Neural implants accelerated reaction times, exoskeletons multiplied strength, and psychological conditioning removed the instinct for self-preservation. Maria went through it all. She felt her body transform, her mind sharpen, her fear fade into something cold and controlled. She became something more than human, but she also became something less. We're not going to survive this, her commanding officer told them during the final briefing. Statistically, none of us will live through the first engagement. But that's not the point. He pointed at the images of the alien fleet on the screen behind him. The point is to make them bleed. The point is to show them that we will not go quietly. The point is to give humanity time to build a future. Maria looked around at her fellow soldiers. Thousands of men and women from every country on Earth, united by a single purpose. They were going to die. They all knew it, and they were smiling. Why are you smiling? A young recruit asked Maria later. He was barely 20, too young for this war, too young for any war. Maria thought about it for a long moment. Because I spent my whole life fighting for things that didn't matter, she said finally. Territory, resources, political disputes. And now, for the first time, I'm fighting for something real. For everyone. For everything. She put her hand on the young man's shoulder. We're going to die up there. But we're going to die together. We're going to die for each other. And that means something. She smiled. That means everything. The Battle of Seoul lasted 6 hours. To the Dominion, it felt like an eternity. They had expected resistance. All species resisted at first. But they had never faced anything like this. The humans fought without logic, without self-preservation, without any of the instincts that made warfare predictable. They used tactics that the Dominion had never imagined. Human ships would deliberately take hits, allowing their shields to fail, just so they could get close enough for suicide attacks. Human soldiers would let themselves be captured, then detonate hidden explosives. Human pilots would broadcast their locations, drawing enemy fire, just to create openings for their comrades. And through it all, they kept coming. For every human ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. For every human soldier killed, 10 more charged forward. The Dominion's numerical superiority meant nothing against enemies who treated their own lives as ammunition. Scholar Orveth, watching from a secure bunker on the flagship, recorded everything. His hands trembled as he documented the carnage. "They're not fighting to win," he whispered into his recorder. "They're fighting to hurt us. Every ship they destroy, every soldier they kill, is a wound in the Dominion's pride. They know they cannot defeat us today, but they're not thinking about today." He paused, watching as another human fighter dove into a Dominion battleship's engines. "They're thinking about tomorrow, and the day after, and the century after that. They're planting seeds of doubt in every conquered species. They're showing the galaxy that the Dominion can bleed." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And the galaxy is watching." In the command center beneath the Swiss Alps, Secretary General Amara Okonkwo watched the battle unfold on 100 screens. Her advisors surrounded her, relaying reports, tracking casualties, coordinating the fleet. The numbers were horrific. Tens of thousands of human pilots dead, hundreds of ships destroyed. The price of victory was beyond calculation, but they were winning. "Carrier Group 7 is reporting success," Admiral Jackson announced. "They've breached the enemy flagship's shields. Send in the Marines," Okonkwo ordered. "I want that ship, ma'am. The casualties will be, I know what they'll be." Okonkwo's voice was steady, but her hands were clenched tight. "Send them anyway. We need prisoners. We need intelligence. We need to understand what we're facing." The Marines went. And they died. And some of them managed to survive long enough to take the ship. The reports from the boarding action were almost impossible to believe. Human soldiers fighting Dominion warriors twice their size and winning. Human Marines continuing to fight with injuries that should have been instantly fatal. Human sergeants carrying wounded comrades through enemy fire while firing with their free hands. Sergeant Maria Santos led the assault on the flagship's bridge. She had been shot 14 times. Her left arm was gone, torn off by an explosion that had killed 3 of her squadmates. Her armor was more blood than metal. She kept fighting. The Dominion commander, a massive creature with gray scales and black eyes, faced her in the final chamber. His guards were dead. His ship was captured. But he still did not understand. "How?" he demanded. "How can you fight like this? You're barely alive." Maria looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "I've been barely alive since I was 19, she said. "This is nothing new." She raised her remaining hand. It held a pistol that shook with her heartbeat. "Do you know what humans say before they die?" she asked. The commander did not answer. "We don't say anything about ourselves. We say names. The names of the people we love. The people we're dying for." She pulled the trigger. The commander fell. "My daughter's name is Rosa," Maria whispered. "She's 7 years old. And she's going to grow up free." Then she collapsed. They found her 3 minutes later, unconscious but alive. Against all odds, against all reason, Maria Santos survived the Battle of Seoul. She would go on to lead dozens of missions, become a legend among both humans and aliens, and eventually die peacefully in her sleep at the age of 92. But in that moment, lying on the floor of an alien bridge, surrounded by the bodies of her enemies and her friends, she was just a mother who wanted her daughter to see the stars. The battle ended. The Dominion fleet was broken. Out of 2,000 ships, only 600 escaped. The rest were destroyed or captured. It was the most devastating defeat in the Empire's history, and it was just the beginning. High Arbiter Kethval received the final casualty reports in silence. His advisors argued around him, but he did not hear them. He was looking at a single image from the battle. A human pilot, moments before her fighter struck a Dominion battleship. She had known she was going to die. The image captured her face clearly. She was smiling. Kethval had conquered species that begged for mercy. He had destroyed civilizations that cursed him with their final breaths. He had faced enemies who were terrified, defiant, furious, or resigned. He had never faced enemies who smiled. They think they've won, War Master, Gorvun growled. We'll show them how wrong they are. We'll send 40 fleets. We'll burn their world until there's nothing left but ash. Kethval looked at him with ancient eyes. And what if 40 fleets are not enough? What if we send 100 fleets, and they defeat those too? What message does that send to our subjects? Gorvun fell silent. These humans, Kethval said slowly. They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They don't fight to survive. They fight to. He struggled for the word. To matter. Their lives are short. Their bodies are weak. And yet they throw themselves into battle as if death means nothing. He stood, his robes flowing around him. I have ruled the Dominion for 300 years. I have made decisions that shaped the fate of trillions. And I tell you now, these humans are more dangerous than anything we have ever faced. He paused. Not because of their technology, not because of their numbers, but because they have something we do not. What? Yara Eth asked quietly. Kethval looked at the image of the smiling pilot one more time. They have nothing to lose. Their lives are brief flames in the darkness, and they have decided to burn as brightly as possible. He turned to face his council. We will destroy them eventually. We must, but it will cost us more than we have ever paid. And when it is done, he shook his head. The galaxy will never see us the same way again. In the ruins of the Ninth Fleet, Scholar Orveth made one final recording. He sat among the bodies of Dominion soldiers and human marines, surrounded by the wreckage of both civilizations. I have studied conquered species for 200 years, he said. I have learned their languages, their cultures, their histories. I have watched them surrender, resist, and die. He looked at a human corpse nearby, a young woman, barely adult by their standards. She had died with a weapon in her hand and a smile on her face. I have never seen anything like humans. They are cruel and kind, violent and gentle, destructive and creative. They have committed atrocities that would make our worst tyrants weep, and they have shown compassion that would shame our greatest saints. He paused. They are chaos given form. And I think that is why we cannot defeat them. We are order. We are structure. We are predictable. He looked at the smile on the dead woman's face. They are everything at once. And against that even an empire cannot stand. He ended the recording. Then he sat in silence, waiting for rescue that might never come. Thinking about the future, the war had just begun. And Orveth knew, with terrible certainty, that the Dominion would never be the same, because they had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. They had awakened humanity, and now the galaxy would burn. The Dominion Senate had not gathered in full assembly for 300 years. The last time had been to declare war on a rival empire that threatened the outer territories. That war had lasted 8 years and cost 17 billion lives. This gathering was for something far worse. High Arbiter Kethval stood at the center of the obsidian chamber, surrounded by thousands of senators representing every conquered world in the empire. They filled the seats in rising circles, their faces illuminated by floating screens that showed the aftermath of the Battle of Sol. The images were horrifying. Dominion warships, the pride of the fleet, reduced to burning wreckage, bodies of elite soldiers floating in the void, and everywhere, mixed among the destruction, the small, fragile forms of human dead. This is what we face, Kethval announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. A species that should have been conquered in a single cycle. A species that should have surrendered the moment they saw our fleet. Instead, he gestured at the screens. Instead, they destroyed 1,400 of our ships. They killed 3 million of our soldiers. They captured our technology and our prisoners. And they did it while outnumbered 2 to 1. Murmurs rippled through the Senate. Fear, anger, disbelief, all of it mixing into a sound like distant thunder. I have consulted with our greatest strategists, Kethval continued. I have reviewed the reports from our surviving commanders. I have studied everything we know about these humans. He paused. And I have reached a decision. The chamber fell silent. This is no longer a conquest. This is an extermination. The humans cannot be integrated into the Dominion. They cannot be controlled. They cannot be broken. His voice hardened. They can only be destroyed. War Master Gorvun stepped forward. With your permission, High Arbiter, I will present our war plan. Screens across the chamber changed, showing maps of the galaxy. A single yellow star blinked at the edge of the spiral arm, Earth-Sun. We will redirect 40 conquest fleets to this sector, Gorvan announced. 80,000 warships, 600 million soldiers, enough firepower to burn their world 1,000 times over. He pointed at the blinking star. They cannot escape, they cannot hide, they cannot run. We will surround their system, cut off all exits, and reduce their planet to molten rock. Every human, from their oldest elder to their youngest infant, will be erased from existence. His voice rose to a roar. This will be the most complete extermination in the history of the Dominion. And when we are done, no species will ever again dare to resist us. The Senate erupted in cheers. Thousands of voices joined together, crying for human blood. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, terrifying. Only a few remained silent. In a shadowed corner of the chamber, Scholar Orveth watched with growing dread. Beside him stood Intelligence Minister Yara Eth, her scales pale with concern. 80,000 ships, she murmured. Every conquest fleet we have. If we fail, we cannot fail, Orveth replied. That's the problem. Failure means the end of the Dominion. Success means... He trailed off. Success means what? Orveth looked at her with old, tired eyes. Success means we burn out the most remarkable species the galaxy has ever seen, and the universe will be poorer for it. Yara Eth stared at him. You admire them. I fear them, Orveth corrected. But yes, I also admire them. They are terrible and magnificent all at once, and we are about to destroy them forever. The cheering continued around them. Neither of them joined in. 6 months later, on a world called Vorndrez, something unexpected happened. Vorn 3 had been conquered by the Dominion 800 years ago. Its people, tall, thin creatures with luminous eyes, had been slaves ever since. They worked in the factories, served in the households, and died in the mines. They had forgotten what freedom felt like. And then the humans came, not in warships, not with weapons. They came in a single transport vessel, broadcasting a message on every frequency. We know you are listening. We know you are afraid. We know you have served the Dominion for centuries, and you have forgotten that any other life is possible. The message came from a human woman with dark skin and calm eyes. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo, the voice of Earth. We are not asking you to fight. We are not asking you to die. We are simply asking you to remember. Remember who you were before the Dominion. Remember what your ancestors dreamed of. Remember that you are not cattle to be herded. The transmission spread across Vorn 3 like wildfire. The Dominion tried to block it, but the humans had learned their communication systems, had found ways around their jamming. The Dominion is not invincible. They came to our world with 2,000 ships, expecting us to kneel. We broke them. We sent them running. And we are just one small planet. Okonkwo leaned forward, her eyes blazing with intensity. There are 12,000 worlds under Dominion rule. 400 billion souls in chains. If even a fraction of you decide to rise, the empire will crumble. She paused. We cannot promise victory. We cannot promise survival. But we can promise you this. You are not alone. Whatever happens to us, whatever the Dominion does to Earth, the fire we have started will not be extinguished. The idea of freedom, once remembered, cannot be forgotten. The transmission ended with coordinates, locations of hidden caches of weapons and supplies that human agents had somehow placed across conquered worlds. Rise, Okonkwo's final words echoed. Rise and be free. On Vorn 3, for the first time in 800 years, someone said the word rebellion. Within 3 months, it was no longer just a word. The uprisings spread like plague. First Vorn 3, then the mining worlds of the Tessic cluster, then the agricultural planets of the Inner Arm. Worlds that had been quiet for centuries suddenly erupted in violence. The Dominion was not prepared. Their forces were concentrated for the assault on Earth. They had stripped garrison troops from conquered worlds, confident that their subjects were too broken to resist. They were wrong. High Arbiter Kethval stood in his private chambers, reading report after report of rebellion. Factories sabotaged, supply lines cut, Dominion administrators assassinated in their beds. How? He demanded of Yara Eth, who stood before him. How are they organizing? How are they communicating? The humans taught them, Yara Eth replied. They've been sending agents across our territory for months. Not soldiers, teachers. They've been teaching our subjects how to resist, how to hide, how to fight. With what resources? Their planet is under siege. They don't need resources. They need ideas. Yara Eth pulled up a holographic image human propaganda that had been found on a dozen worlds. They're not giving our subjects weapons, they're giving them hope. Kethval stared at the image. It showed a human hand reaching toward an alien one. Different species united in purpose. They're building an alliance, he realized. Not just against us. They're trying to create something new, something we cannot control. Yara Eth agreed. Even if we destroy Earth, the seeds they've planted will continue to grow. We would have to burn half the galaxy to root out what they've started. For a long moment, Kethval was silent. Then he turned to the window, looking out at the stars that his ancestors had conquered. Send word to the fleet, he said finally. We accelerate the timeline. I want Earth destroyed within 6 months. The fleets are not all in position. I don't care. Kethval's voice was cold. Every day we wait, the humans grow stronger. Every day we wait, more of our subjects remember what freedom feels like. We end this now. He turned back to face her. Whatever it costs. On Earth, the people prepared for the end. Secretary General Okonkwo stood before the United Earth Council, delivering the speech that would define her legacy. We have done everything we can, she said. We have built ships that should not exist. We have created weapons that break the laws of physics. We have united our species in a way that was never thought possible. She paused, looking at the faces before her. Leaders from every nation, scientists from every field, soldiers from every continent, and it is not enough. The Dominion is sending 80,000 ships. We have 5,000. The mathematics do not lie. She saw the fear in their eyes, the despair, the crushing weight of inevitable defeat. But I did not come here to talk about mathematics. She stepped forward, her voice rising. I came here to talk about humanity, about who we are, about what we mean. Screens behind her lit up with images. Human history, in all its horror and glory. We have survived ice ages and famines. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars that should have ended us. And every single time, we came back, stronger, wiser, more determined. The images changed. Now, they showed the Battle of Seoul. Human ships charging into enemy lines. Human soldiers fighting against impossible odds. We have proven that we can hurt them. We have proven that we can make them bleed. And now we must prove one more thing. She looked directly at the cameras, knowing that her words were being broadcast to every human alive. We must prove that we will not be erased. That even if they destroy our planet, they cannot destroy what we are. That human spirit, human courage, human defiance, these things are bigger than any one world. Her voice softened. Tomorrow, 80,000 warships will enter our system. Tomorrow, we will face the full might of an empire that has conquered 12,000 worlds. Tomorrow, many of us will die. Tears glittered in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. But we will not die begging. We will not die running. We will die fighting. We will die together. And when the history of this galaxy is written, they will remember us. She raised her fist. They will remember that one small species, on one small planet, looked at the greatest empire in history and said, no, we will not kneel. The room erupted. Not in fear, not in despair, in something that looked almost like joy. They were going to die. They all knew it. And somehow, impossibly, they had made peace with it. Because death was not the worst thing. Surrender was worse. Living on their knees was worse. And they would rather burn than bow. The human fleet gathered at the edge of the solar system. 5,000 ships, crewed by men and women who had volunteered knowing they would not return. They had said goodbye to their families, their friends, their homes. They had made peace with their gods, whatever those gods might be. And now they waited. Captain Thomas Webb stood on the bridge of the carrier Independence. He was 43 years old, a veteran of 2 major conflicts, and he had never expected to die in space fighting aliens. But here he was. All ships report ready, Captain, his executive officer announced. The fleet is in formation. Webb nodded. On his screens, he could see the edge of the system. In a few hours, the Dominion Armada would emerge from hyperspace. 80,000 ships against 5,000. It should have been hopeless. It should have been impossible. But then, So was everything humans had done for the last 4 years. Open a channel, Webb ordered. Fleet-wide, his face appeared on every ship in the human fleet. Pilots in their fighters, Marines in their assault craft, engineers in their engine rooms. They all stopped to listen. "I'm not going to lie to you," Webb said. "You know the odds. You know what's coming. And you chose to be here anyway." He paused, looking at the stars. "I've been thinking about why we're doing this, why we're willing to die." He turned back to the camera, and I realized, it's not about winning. It's not even about survival. It's about showing the whole galaxy what we're made of. His voice hardened. The Dominion has conquered thousands of species. They've broken billions of souls, but they've never met anyone like us. They've never faced a species that fights harder when cornered, that grows stronger when wounded, that burns brighter when dying. He smiled, a fierce, defiant smile. "Today, we're going to show them what humanity means. We're going to hurt them so badly that they'll never forget us. We're going to make them pay for every life they take, every ship they destroy, every world they burn." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And when it's over, when the last human ship falls silent, the galaxy will know. We were here. We mattered. We fought." He raised his hand in salute. "It has been an honor serving with you, all of you, from every nation, every culture, every belief. We're different in so many ways, but today, we are one." He held the salute. "Today, we are humanity." Across the fleet, thousands of hands rose in answer. Different species might not have understood the gesture, but the meaning was clear. They were ready to die. At the edge of the solar system, sensors detected a ripple in space. The Dominion Armada was coming, and humanity was waiting for them. But they were not alone. From behind Jupiter, a fleet emerged. Not human ships, something else. Vessels of strange design, built by species that had thrown off their chains. From the asteroid belt, more ships appeared. Former slaves of the Dominion, armed with weapons from hidden caches. From the outer reaches of the system, signals arrived. Other species, watching from the darkness, had finally decided to act. Captain Webb stared at his screens in disbelief. What had been 5,000 ships was now 10,000, 20,000. More kept coming. "Secretary General," he breathed into his calm. "Are you seeing this?" Amara Okonkwo's voice came back, thick with emotion. "I see it, Captain. The message we sent. They listened. They remembered." Webb looked at the fleet surrounding him. Dozens of species, each one conquered by the Dominion, each one told that resistance was impossible. And here they were, together, ready to fight. He laughed. It was a wild sound, full of wonder and joy and terrible hope. "Well then," he said, "I guess we're not alone after all." The Dominion Armada emerged from hyperspace. 80,000 ships, bristling with weapons, certain of victory. And for the first time in 6,000 years, they faced not a single species, but a coalition. The war for the galaxy had begun. High Arbiter Kethval stood on the command bridge of the Eternal Dominion, the largest warship ever constructed. It was 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack moons, shielded by technology that had never failed. For 300 years, it had been the symbol of the Empire's invincibility. Today, it would lead the final destruction of humanity. Kethval watched as his armada spread across the void. 80,000 ships, arranged in perfect formation. 600 million soldiers, ready to fight and die for the Dominion. More firepower than any civilization in history had ever assembled in one place. Against this, the humans had gathered their pitiful fleet. 20,000 ships at most, many of them from slave species that had somehow found the courage to rebel. "They should have surrendered," Kethval murmured. "They should have known this was hopeless." High Arbiter, his tactical officer, approached with a tablet. "The enemy fleet is moving into defensive formation around the third planet. They're protecting their homeworld." "Of course they are." Kethval allowed himself a thin smile. "Sentimental creatures. They'll die defending dirt and water." He turned to his communications officer. "Broadcast the surrender demand one final time. Tell them that if they lay down their weapons now, we will spare their civilians. A quick death instead of a slow one." The officer nodded and began the transmission. Minutes passed. The human fleet did not move. The coalition ships held their positions. Then a response came. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo appeared on the main screen. She looked older than the last time Kethval had seen her. Tired, gray at her temples, but her eyes were still burning with that strange human intensity. "High Arbiter Kethval," she said. "I received your message. Then you know what you face. Surrender now, and your death will be merciful." Okonkwo laughed. It was a genuine laugh, warm and almost kind. "You still don't understand us, do you? After everything, after watching us fight, after seeing what we're capable of." She shook her head. "We're not here to surrender. We're not here to beg. We're here to give you one last chance." Kethval's eyes narrowed. "A chance? You threaten me? I offer you mercy." Okonkwo's voice softened. "Turn back. Take your fleet and go home. Leave us alone. Leave the species who have joined us alone, and we will let you live." The bridge fell silent. Officers exchanged glances of disbelief. "You have 20,000 ships," Kethval said slowly. "I have 80,000. And you offer me mercy?" "Yes." Okonkwo leaned forward. "Because I know something you don't. I know what's waiting for you if you continue. I know what humanity becomes when we're cornered. I know what we're willing to do. Enlighten me." Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with sorrow. "We burned our own planet once. Did you know that? We created weapons that could end all life on our world, and we came within minutes of using them. We've committed atrocities that would make your worst tyrants flinch. We're capable of horrors that even we can barely comprehend." She met his eyes through the screen. "You think you know war. You've conquered species that surrendered, that begged, that died with whimpers. But you've never faced an enemy that will burn itself to ash just to take you with it." Her voice hardened. "Turn back. This is your last warning." Kethval stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a cold, contemptuous sound. "You are brave, human. I will give you that. But bravery is not enough." He raised his hand. "All ships. Attack formation. Destroy them all." The transmission ended. The Dominion Armada began to move, and the final battle of Seoul began. The void erupted in fire. 80,000 Dominion ships advanced in perfect formation, their weapons blazing. Plasma bolts turned the darkness into day. Energy beams carved through space like the wrath of angry gods. The Coalition fleet met them head-on. Captain Thomas Webb led the charge from the Independence. His carrier launched fighters in waves, each pilot knowing they would not return. They dove into the Dominion lines like fireflies against a hurricane, and they burned bright. Human pilots pushed their ships past every safety limit. They accelerated until their bodies broke. They flew into enemy fire without flinching. They died by the thousands. But for every human that fell, a Dominion ship burned. The Coalition species fought alongside them. The Vornathi, tall and slender, fought with a cold fury born of 800 years of slavery. The Tesek, armored and relentless, used their mining ships as battering rams. The Kethani, small and quick, swarmed enemy vessels like locusts. Each species had its own reason to fight, its own memories of Dominion cruelty, its own burning need for vengeance. Together, they were something the galaxy had never seen. Scholar Orveth watched the battle from a transport ship at the edge of the combat zone. He had demanded to be here, to see the end of everything he had predicted. A human stood beside him. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, one of the soldiers assigned to protect him. She had lost her left eye in an earlier battle. The socket was covered by a metal plate, but she had refused a replacement. She said she wanted to remember. "Why do you fight like this?" Orveth asked, as another human ship exploded on his screen. "Why do you throw away your lives?" Chen was quiet for a moment. "You really don't understand, do you?" "No. I have studied your species for years. I know your history, your biology, your psychology, but I cannot understand this." Chen pointed at the screen. A human fighter was diving toward a Dominion battleship. The pilot had activated their self-destruct. In seconds, they would be dead. "See that pilot?" His name was David Park. He was 23. He had a girlfriend back home, a mother who cried when he enlisted, a dog named Max. The fighter struck the battleship. Both vanished in nuclear fire. He's dead now. Everything he was, everything he could have been, gone in an instant. Chen's voice was steady. "And you want to know why he did it?" Orveth nodded. "Because he knew that if he didn't, the people he loved would die anyway." His girlfriend, his mother, his stupid dog. Chen turned to face him. Humans don't fight to live. We fight so that the people we love can live. There's a difference. Orvith looked back at the battle. Thousands of lights were winking out human and Dominion alike. The cost was beyond calculation. You would destroy yourselves to hurt us, he said quietly. Yes. Chen's voice was hard. And that's why you can't win. You can kill us all, but you'll never break us. The battle raged for hours. The Dominion advanced steadily, their numbers overwhelming. The coalition fell back, leaving wreckage in their wake, but they did not break. Every meter of space was paid for in Dominion blood. Every advance cost ships that could not be replaced. The humans fought like demons, using tactics that made no sense, sacrificing everything for the smallest advantage, and slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. High Arbiter Kethval watched his tactical displays with growing disbelief. His fleet was winning mathematically, inevitably winning. But the cost, we've lost 15,000 ships. His tactical officer reported, voice shaking. Another 20,000 are damaged. Casualties are approaching 200 million. Kethval's claws dug into his chair. 15,000 ships. More than he had lost in the last century of warfare combined. Continue the assault, he ordered. We will crush them. High Arbiter, if we continue at this rate, I gave you an order. Kethval's voice was ice. Destroy them. Whatever the cost. The Dominion pushed forward. The coalition fell back. Earth grew larger on the screens, blue and green and fragile, and then everything changed. The human flagship Unity broke formation. It accelerated toward the Eternal Dominion at impossible speed, its engines burning white-hot. They're targeting us, the tactical officer shouted. The human flagship is on a collision course. Kethval smiled coldly. They think to ram us? The Eternal Dominion has shields that can withstand a star's heat. They will accomplish nothing. But the Unity was not aiming for a collision. It stopped at point-blank range, close enough that the Dominion's main guns could not track it. And then, it began broadcasting. Secretary General Okonkwo's face appeared on every screen in the Dominion fleet. You didn't listen, she said. We gave you a chance. You didn't take it. Behind her, Kethval could see the Unity's bridge. Officers were working at their stations. Some were crying. All of them were smiling. This is what humanity does, High Arbiter. When we can't win, we make sure you can't win either. Okonkwo pressed a button. Throughout the coalition fleet, ships began to change course. They weren't retreating. They weren't attacking. They were converging. On the Eternal Dominion. All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship, Okonkwo commanded. Everything we have, everything we are. Kethval understood. In that moment, he finally understood. They weren't trying to win the battle. They were trying to kill him. To destroy the symbol of Dominion power. To prove that even the mightiest could fall. All ships, defend the flagship, he shouted. Stop them, but there were too many. The coalition vessels came from every direction, ignoring the Dominion ships that fired at them, ignoring their own losses. They had only one target. The first wave struck the Eternal Dominion's shields. Dozens of ships, each one carrying nuclear weapons, each pilot holding down the trigger until the end. The shields flickered. The second wave hit, then the third, then the fourth. Shields failing, someone screamed. Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. Kethval watched as his invincible flagship began to die. Human ships slammed into it like meteors, each one a spark of defiance, each one a statement that echoed across the galaxy. We will not kneel. The Unity was the last. It had held back, waiting, while the others cleared the way. Okonkwo's face appeared one final time. Behind her, the bridge was burning. Her officers were dead. She was bleeding from a wound on her head, but she was smiling. I wanted to look you in the eye, she said. I wanted to tell you what you ignored. Kethval stared at her through the screen. For the first time in 300 years, he had nothing to say. We warned you, Okonkwo whispered. We really did. The Unity struck the Eternal Dominion at full speed. Both ships vanished in a ball of nuclear fire that outshone the sun. High Arbiter Kethval, ruler of the Velanor Dominion, conqueror of 12,000 worlds, died in the light of human defiance. The Dominion fleet broke. It was not a retreat. It was a rout. Ships fled in every direction. commanders abandoning formation, crews panicking as word spread of the High Arbiter's death. The coalition pursued. Not to destroy, they were too few for that, but to witness, to watch as the greatest empire in history crumbled before their eyes. Of the 80,000 ships that had entered the Sol system, barely 30,000 escaped. The rest were destroyed, captured, or abandoned. It was the worst defeat in the history of galactic warfare, and it was only the beginning. Across Dominion space, rebellions erupted. Worlds that had been quiet for centuries rose up overnight. The news of Sol spread like wildfire. The Dominion was not invincible. The Dominion could be hurt. The Dominion could fall. Within a year, the Empire had shattered. Former subjects declared independence. Former slaves became free. The war masters and the arbiters and the administrators were overthrown, executed, or fled. And through it all, a single message echoed across the stars: we are not alone. We can be free. 1 year after the final battle of Sol, a ceremony was held on Earth. The planet had survived. The shields had held long enough for the battle to turn. But the cost: 8 billion humans had lived before the war. Now there were 4 billion. Half of humanity, gone in 4 years of conflict. But they were free. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood in the crowd, watching as the memorial was unveiled. A massive structure of white stone and black metal, reaching toward the sky. On its surface, names were carved, billions of names, human and alien alike. Everyone who had died in the war. She found David Park's name, the pilot who had died to hurt a battleship. She traced the letters with her finger. "Thank you," she whispered. It mattered. At the base of the memorial, a woman spoke. She was young, barely 30, chosen to lead the reconstruction. The war had taken too many of their leaders. They had to rebuild from what remained. "We stand here today because of sacrifice," she said. "Because ordinary people did extraordinary things. Because when the universe told us to kneel, we said no." She looked up at the memorial. "We paid a terrible price. We will carry the scars of this war forever. But we are still here. We are still human. And we will never forget what that means." The crowd was silent. In the distance, ships crossed the sky, human ships, yes, but also vessels from a dozen other species. The coalition had become something more. A new alliance, born from shared suffering, united by hope. Scholar Orveth stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. He had been offered a place in the new government, a chance to help rebuild what his people had destroyed. He had accepted, though he still did not fully understand the creatures he served. A human child ran past him, laughing. She was chasing a ball, completely unaware of the tragedy that surrounded her. Orveth watched her with ancient eyes. This child had been born during the war. She had never known peace, but she was laughing. That was what he could never understand about humans. They suffered. They died. They endured horrors beyond imagination. And somehow, impossibly, they kept laughing. The ceremony ended. The crowd dispersed. But Orveth remained, staring at the memorial. A Dominion refugee approached him. A former soldier, one of the few who had surrendered rather than die. His scales were pale, his eyes haunted. "Was it worth it?" the soldier asked. "Everything we did, everything we lost." Orveth thought for a long moment. "The Dominion ruled for 6,000 years, he said finally. "We conquered 12,000 worlds. We broke 400 billion souls." He paused. "And one small species, on one small planet, brought us to our knees." He looked at the names carved in stone. So many names, so many lights extinguished. They warned us. Before the war, before the first shot was fired, they sent us a message. 12 words. Turn back, or face the consequences. He shook his head. We laughed. We thought we knew what they were. And now? Orveth looked at the child. Still laughing, still playing, still completely alive. "Now I know. They are chaos and order. They are cruelty and compassion. They are the worst and the best of everything the universe can create." He smiled sadly. "And they are our future." The soldier looked confused. "Our future? The Dominion is dead. The old ways are finished. Whatever comes next, humanity will be at the center of it. They have earned that right with blood and fire and sacrifice beyond measure." Orveth turned to face the soldier. "We had our chance to shape the galaxy. We used it to conquer and destroy. Now it's their turn." He gestured at the humans around them, mourning. rebuilding, hoping. Let's see what they do with it. In the years that followed, humanity did remarkable things. They helped rebuild shattered worlds. They shared their technology freely. They welcomed former enemies and former slaves alike. But they never forgot. Every year, on the anniversary of the final battle, humans across the galaxy paused to remember. They spoke the names of the dead. They lit candles in the darkness. They reminded themselves of the price of freedom. And they reminded the universe of a simple truth. Earth had sent a single message. The Dominion had ignored it. And that had been their doom. Far away, in the ruins of the old Imperial Palace, a recording played on an endless loop. It had been left there by human soldiers, a monument to what had been and what would never be again. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo's voice echoed through the empty halls. "We know you're coming. Turn back now. There will be no second warning." 12 words. Just 12 words. They had changed the galaxy. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife awaited brave souls, the billions who had died for those 12 words smiled. They had warned them, and now the universe remembered.